Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the SKNIS Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards. Welcome to InFocus, a weekly program where we zoom in on what's happening within and throughout the government, your government. The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank is celebrating 40 years of service to the governments and people of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. Our guest today is Timothy Antoine, Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. We will engage the Governor on the history of the bank, planned celebratory activities for the anniversary, and how the work of the bank impacts people like you, people like me. Stay with us as we delve into your government, your business. Thanks for staying with us, and allow me now to introduce and welcome the Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Governor Antoine. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richards. Greetings to you, and let me say greetings to all of our listeners and viewers, wherever you are, in our currency union or around the world. Thanks for having me.
Well, Governor, it certainly is good to have you. And I did tell you after our conversation a few weeks ago that I would love to have you on the show, and you have consented to that, and so we're happy to have you.
Thanks, you kept your word.
Yes, absolutely. And so we want to talk a bit about the ECCB, which of course it's celebrating 40 years. And let's go back a bit for those who don't know. What led to the inception of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank?
Good, so thanks for asking, and a little bit of history is useful here. So recall, before independence, we were all colonies. Somewhere around 1950, in fact in 1950, we had what was called the British Caribbean Currency Board, the BCCB. So you had the windwards, leewards, including Barbados, as well as Trinidad and Guyana. When Trinidad and Guyana assumed independence in 1962, they withdrew from the BCCB. And that led to the formation of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Authority, ECCA, in 1965. So ECCA was now the windwards, the leewards, and Barbados. So the responsibility of ECCA was to issue and manage the EC currency. Then Barbados got independence in 1966. And in 1972 formed its own central bank. So, by the way, in 1950, when the BCCB was headquartered in Trinidad and Guyana withdrew, we formed ECCA. ECCA, the headquarters was now in Barbados. Then Barbados got independence in 1966 and formed its own central bank in 1972, at which point Barbados withdrew from ECCA. And ECCA had to find a new home. And that is how ECCA got to St. Kitts and Nevis. As I understood it then, Premier Bradshaw said St. Kitts need to have a regional organization. St. Lucia had something, Grenada had something, St. Kitts had nothing. We need a regional organization in St. Kitts. And of course, recall that Premier Bradshaw was the finance minister in the Federation, the West Indies Federation, the federal government there. So I think he had a lot of influence and persuasion. So ECCA came to St. Kitts. And in 1976, they took the decision to peg the EC dollar to the US dollar, 1 US, 2.7 EC. We keep moving it along. In 1981, Treaty of Bastille, the formation of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. And as part of that overall regional integration movement of these small countries, the windwards and leewards, it was agreed that we should go forward and form a full-fledged central bank. And so on October 1, 1983, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank was established. So it's important to see from whence we came. And the dominant theme or storyline in all of the history that I just quickly outlined is small countries, very small countries, trying to find a way to survive. These were pre-independence times. We're still in the colonial era. And there was real concern about how these countries could make it. I will tell you, there are those who felt they could not make it. And there was a lot of despair in these small islands when the Federation collapsed. There's a piece from Arthur Lewis called Agony of the Little Eight, which speaks to the constitutional crisis, the constitutional limbo that these countries found themselves in. And there was a lot of head scratching and some despair about the future of the viability of these small islands. And they came together. They came together. It's an enduring lesson. Took collective action to form ECCA and ultimately to form the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. And as I say, the rest is history.
All right. And let me ask the Governor, because you mentioned that it was headquartered in Barbados before it came to St. Kitts and Nevis. Was there a time, to your knowledge, that the EC dollar was accepted in Barbados, or given the fact that the bank was headquartered there, or was it, do you think it was just there because of the infrastructural development at that time?
Yes, before the Barbados dollar, yes, the EC dollar was accepted in Barbados. Indeed, it was. And it was only after the Barbadian dollar emerged, post the formation of the central bank, post 1972, that they started to move away, obviously, from the EC to the Barbados dollar, or the Barbadian dollar. And it's an interesting question you ask, because I am keen to see the wider usage of the EC dollar in Barbados. And in fact, that's an issue I'm looking into right now. I won't say more on that, because we have to engage the relevant authorities properly. But there was a time when the EC dollar was used in Barbados and indeed throughout the windwards and leewards.
Yeah. And certainly important as Barbados seeks to strengthen its relationship with the OECS. So let me move on then, Governor, in terms of the functioning of the bank. What is its responsibility?
So the agreement, the ECCB agreement, which is not just an agreement but law of the land for all 8 members, speak to specific things that the ECCB is responsible for. Things like the supply of money and credit, the growth and development of the member countries. But to put it in very plain terms that the woman and man in the street understand, the ECCB is responsible for keeping our dollar strong and stable, keeping our deposits safe, and supporting the growth and development of our member countries. Those are the top 3 things that we have to do. Strong and stable dollar, secure deposits, and support the growth and development of our member countries.
And so the ECCU is made up of how many countries?
8 countries. So if you think of them, it's Anguilla, then we have Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and Grenadines. That should give us 8.
And collectively they're known as the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union.
The Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. So the bank is their central bank, but the group of countries is called the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. Why? Single currency. We share one currency, the EC dollar.
Right. So let's talk a bit about the presence that the ECCB has in each of the member states of the ECCU.
Right. So we are headquartered here in St. Kitts and Nevis, or St. Christopher and Nevis. And in our other member countries, or other 7, where we're not headquartered, we have a country office, or an agency office. And we have 2 members of staff. We have a country manager, resident representative, and we have an administrative professional. So in every country except St. Kitts and Nevis, we have 2 members of staff. We have office space. When our staff travel, whether it's our examiners or even myself, for country outreach or other missions, we go to offices. I have an office in some of these offices. I can have people there. I can meet people there. But we have 2 members of staff in each country in our country office. We opened country offices. We started in Grenada in 1984, And over the next several years, we open an office in each of our member countries. And that's an important presence that we have. And the office helps with dealing with the banks, currency issues, and of course representing the bank in the member country.
Now, you also mentioned earlier that the bank essentially has 3 priorities. How does the bank go about ensuring that these priorities are kept?
So we follow the law via the ECCB agreement, but particularly, as a matter of management now, leadership and management, we articulate strategic plans. So when I assumed office since 2016, for example, we developed a strategic plan. We're now in the second strategic plan called Transforming the ECCU through Innovation and Collective Action. Each plan has strategic priorities. In this case, for example, right now we have financial stability. Then we have a priority for payment modernization and financial inclusion. We have another priority for data analytics and transformation, data transformation. We have one for corporate, environmental, social governance, and there's another one called organizational effectiveness. So each strategic plan has 5 priorities. We link it back to the ECCB agreement, and we develop work programs, projects, policies, plans around these strategic priorities. We take that to our board, we get a formal endorsement by our board, we table it in the Monetary Council, and that is how that informs the work that we do. So anything that we do, whether it's the financial inclusion survey we did recently, financial literacy survey, or the DCash, or the greening of the campus, they all fall under these strategic priorities, which go back to the ECCB agreement.
You mentioned the Monetary Council. What is that?
So the Monetary Council is the group of finance ministers. Every member country has a minister of finance. And those ministers of finance collectively are appointed to the Monetary Council. The Monetary Council is the highest decision-making body of our central bank. Monetary Council, which are our ministers of finance, many of whom are prime ministers. Not all, but there was a time when all of them were. Now it's some, but they're all finance ministers. And then below that you have the board. So the Monetary Council, for example, will determine the exchange rate. If you needed to change the exchange rate, that has to be a decision of the Monetary Council, a unanimous decision. The principle of unanimity. Everybody has to agree we're changing the exchange rate, the parity. Secondly, the Monetary Council approved the minimum savings rate. Right now, if you go to your bank, Mr. Richards, your bank must give you, for your savings, 2%. That's stipulated by the Monetary Council. They can't give you less than 2% on your savings. They could give you more if they want to. I don't think they will do that, but they certainly can't give you less. That's the Monetary Council decision. And finally, in terms of main decision, what we call type 1, the rate at which we lend to governments and banks, the short-term rate is called the discount rate. So the central bank lending to a government or to a commercial bank, that rate is fixed by the Monetary Council under 1 year. And then we have a long-term rate, up to 15 years, over 1 year, up to 15 years, that rate is fixed by the Monetary Council. As we speak, the short-term rate or the discount rate is 2%, the long-term rate is 3.5%. ECCB management, we recommend, but it is the Monetary Council that decides. There are other decisions as well, but those are the big decisions. And then of course, the Monetary Council decides and appoints a governor and a deputy governor. So those are some of the key responsibilities of the Monetary Council.
And so, as you said, that there are ministers of finance. Essentially, of course, they are politicians.
Yes.
Well, for the most part, some of them would have been appointed, I imagine, in some territories, depending on the circumstances at the time. But the question is asked then, in terms of them being politicians, that means that there's change. With elections come new ministers, and it doesn't even have to be an election. There could be a decision in cabinet to change.
Yes.
I think something happened recently like that in Grenada.
Yes.
Well, Prime Minister Micheal, he's no longer the Minister of Finance now.
Yes.
So how does the bank deal with the changes that come? I don't want to say necessarily constant changes, but the changes that come with a new member of the Monetary Council.
We deal with it. We take it in stride. So first of all, the people decide who is the Minister of Finance. Well, they decide on the government. And ultimately, the Prime Minister picks his cabinet, his or her cabinet. We are advised. That's democracy at work. Government changes, you have a new minister, you have a new cabinet, you have a new minister. We have a process to onboard them. And then, essentially, we have a rotation amongst the council members. So it's normal. I mean, we're used to that. We know elections come, we know cabinets can change, and we are quite accustomed with that. And beyond the central bank, even in my prior life as a financial secretary in Grenada, I'm used to that. So we are quite comfortable. Once we are advised formally, we have a particular process. We have to see an instrument gazetted, a formal instrument of appointment for legal purposes. Once we have that, from our legal team verifies, there's now an oath of office. They have to swear an oath of secrecy, an oath of office to come onto the council. We do that for our board as well. And then we brief them on onboarding in terms of what to expect, what are the requirements, what are the rules, and they're up and running.
Have there been occasions where the advice from the ECCB may not have been readily accepted by all member states?
Sure, absolutely.
What happens then?
That's the way. The way we work is we try to forge consensus. So we're not the Monetary Council doesn't really vote that much. In fact, it really doesn't vote. We discuss. If there's a difference of views, we try to see, the council tries to see each other's viewpoints and come to some understanding. And every now and then, you may have a difference. For example, when the Republic was acquiring the Scotia operations in the Caribbean, the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda was very clear, publicly and in the council, that he would not support that particular acquisition. He wanted a local bank to acquire Scotia. We discussed it, we engaged, we heard them out, everybody gave their views, and we came to a position, and we resolved the matter in a very amicable and a very constructive way. So you will find from time to time there are differences. But I will say, as a general rule, even with robust debates and even sometimes disagreements, the solidarity in the Monetary Council is very, very strong. And for me as governor, that has been inspiring and really encouraging, especially in difficult times. I'll give you an example. During the pandemic, we came together, we stuck together. When we were struggling to get vaccines in the early months, when vaccines became available, you know, Dominica said, we share some of what we have with other member countries. That is solidarity. That's an example. You know, so we stick together. And I think, Mr. Richards, part of the reason why we do so is because we have proven over time, it's time tested, that when we come together, we give ourselves the best chance to succeed. And that is a model of cooperation that I think we want to continue to emulate.
Now, the Monetary Council is headed by a chair. Mm-hmm. How is the chair determined?
Alpha sequence. So we go alphabetically, and we basically go from A to S, from Anguilla to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we keep the rotation moving.
And so what happens if there's a case where there's a new member of the Monetary Council, as we established before, very big elections or whatever, and that country is in line to assume the chair?
The country assumes the chair. So unless the country says, we don't want to do it right now, or we want a switch, we'll do it the following year. That doesn't really happen, to be honest. But if a country asks, of course, that will be accommodated. But we help each other out. So there's no real issue about countries just coming on and taking over the chair. I mean, we're speaking about ECCB, but we had a situation in OECS recently. Prime Minister Drew had to assume the chair of OECS within a year of taking office. That was the sequence. So that's not an issue. We work together and we support the countries. And typically the countries understand, for that year, I have a responsibility to chair the Monetary Council, and they are always willing to, countries are always willing to do that.
Okay, and of course, ECCU, the countries, they're also members of the OECS, which is the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. What's the relationship between the bank and the OECS state, the commission? So
the OECS was set up, as I said, in 1981. The ECCB was set up in 1983. Of course, there was ECCA before ECCB. Under the broad agreement, the Treaty of Chaguaramas, the Treaty of Bastille, right. Chaguaramas is CARICOM, Treaty of Bastille is OECS. That was first signed in 1981 and then revised with the OECS Economic Union, we have specific responsibilities. So OECS would focus on things like the non-financial. They would focus on foreign policy, the appointment of ambassadors, joint ambassadors, for example, Morocco or Canada or Brussels, a position at the UN, education issues, health, fisheries. Those are OECS Commission issues. Our central bank is very specialized and focused on financial sector issues. Financial stability, financial development, sector development. Those are the areas. So even if you look at the OECS development strategy, which was articulated some years ago, there's a chapter in there on financial sector development. That is for ECCB. The rest of the chapter is for other OECS and others. Now, we do collaborate on other things, but in terms of our lead responsibility, it is for the financial sector. So we have authority, jurisdiction in that area. But the truth is that we're part of a regional movement, and in a sense, we are an organ of the OECS, because the OECS is sort of the umbrella grouping, if you will, in a juridical term, and with specialist areas. So ECCB, the central bank, ECTEL, Eastern Caribbean Telecoms Authority, Eastern Caribbean Court, the Supreme Court, Eastern Caribbean Civil Aviation Authority. All of them are part of the broad OECS with very specific mandates in law. Like the ECCB agreement is what governs ECCB. But we're all joined up in that sense as part of the OECS.
And of course, as part of the OECS, these countries are also a part of CARICOM, which is a much larger group, the Caribbean Community.
Yes.
So how does the bank interact with central banks from other CARICOM member states now?
So we have a group called the CARICOM Central Bank Governors. And we meet twice a year. We rotate the chair. I chaired it, ECCB chaired it back in 2018, yeah. So I was chairman for that year. But we collaborate very, very closely. We talk together, we support each other, we're in touch all the time, we coordinate across the central banks. I just had a colleague come back from the Bahamas, 2 weeks ago, for a central bank meeting in the Bahamas for bank operations. I have another colleague who went to Belize about 2 weeks before that for a meeting of HR directors, central banks. So central banks have a very good working relationship, and we, ECCB, have a very strong relationship with, and a lot of, we are held in high regard amongst the central banking community. They ask us for something, we give them. If we need something, we ask them, they give it to us.
And that includes, of course, with the international bodies as well. So
yes, International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, Commonwealth Secretariat, BIS, the Bank for International Settlements. Very strong working relationships with these international organizations.
Now, sir, we want to touch on the fixed rate that you established earlier in terms of one EC dollar, that is $1 to 2.7 EC.
Yes.
But we're going to take a break and we're going to come back and discuss that.
Sure.
We'll be right back with more in Focus. Welcome back to InFocus. We continue our discussion with the Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Timothy Antoine. The fixed rate, sir, as we established, that is the fixed rate between US dollar and EC dollar. You discussed that it was back in the day, it was decided to be pegged against the US dollar. Talk to us about the importance of having a fixed rate and the advantage of such as opposed to having a floating rate.
Right. So again, for the benefit of our viewers, I want to remind them that before we pegged in 1976 $1 to 2.7 EC, we were pegged to pound sterling. one pound sterling 4.8 EC. And the reason why the leaders at the time took the decision was because we recognized that our major trading partner was really now the United States, not the United Kingdom. We still had trade ties with the UK, but our major trading partner, trade flows, remittances, our diaspora, and so on. And so we pegged. What's the importance of that? Certainty. Because by keeping the exchange rate fixed, you eliminate exchange rate risk. You're not worried that today is 2.7 to 1, tomorrow it might be 3, the next week it might be 4. Because if you think about it, 1 US, you need 2.7 EC to purchase 1 US dollar. If next month now it's $3, you have to find more money to purchase that US dollar.
But in the same vein, Governor, the currency also goes down. Take, for instance, the pound sterling. You know, after they had the Brexit, you know, there were some fluctuations. And so some persons could say, well, we could benefit from that as well.
And that hurt us because pensioners here who were getting British pensions saw their money get less and less. The EC they were getting for their pensions fell. People want predictability. You could plan around predictability. And so the point I was making on Sunday at our anniversary service is that the business community appreciates that. You want to know, what is this going to cost me? And what is it going to cost me not just now, but next month, and the end of the year, and next year? If I take out a loan to invest, this is what I have to repay, and this is how long, that's my payback period. The stability of the dollar gives confidence to businesses, households, governments, international organizations. They know what they're dealing with. You contrast that with other parts of the world where you don't know. Even in the CARICOM area, I mean, I'm not knocking any currency, but you have values that vary. One might be 1 US is 7, another one might be 1 US is 125, 1 US is 250. We have had the same value, same stability, same parity since 1976. Confidence, certainty, continuity. So for the household, that really is important. I know what it is that I have to pay, and I also know what I will receive, say, from remittances, because this value is the same.
Any discussions, any grumblings, so to speak, that perhaps the Monetary Council, some members may want to change that?
No, there hasn't been. There hasn't been. I think people recognize that it's working for us, and therefore we should continue to work it. I was asked some months ago, well, have we considered lowering it, meaning maybe instead of 1 to 2.7, doing 1 to 2? And I have explained on occasion since that we have to understand what that would mean. What that essentially would mean is that our exports would become more expensive. We export. The principal export for us is tourism. The people come here, but that's an export. It's tourism. If you lower that value, let's say, when I say lower the value, you move the priority from, say, 1.2.7 to 1 to 2. What that means is that your exports is more expensive because that tourists who could use that US to give them 2.7 EC is now only could only go for as 2 EC. So you have to look at that side of the argument as well, because as small open economies which are price takers, we don't set the price. The price is set for us because we're too small to influence price. We have to be careful about those things because we have to make sure that our exports don't become more expensive. Already, Mr. Richards, we are deemed to be fairly high price compared to some other parts of the world. I give you a simple example on energy. A typical hotel in Mexico would spend about 3% of their room rate on energy. 3%. In the Eastern Caribbean, we could be spending up to 30% of our room rate on the energy bill, the cost of electricity. You see how that so we can compete with Mexico and Acapulco and some of these countries and or these resorts and areas. If you change the priority, you make us even less competitive. So that's a simple explanation, example of why it is not a straightforward thing as some people say, well, just drop it so that we would be able to have more money in our pocket. You have to look at the macroeconomic impact of that decision, and it's far wider than a household.
Right. And certainly that would, with every country, mostly I should say, within the ECCU having tourism as their main contributor in terms of the GDP, that certainly is something that has to be considered very carefully. And yeah, we could understand. And thanks
and
for
our
that
major source of foreign exchange.
Right.
That's where we get the bulk of our foreign exchange.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And as you mentioned, in terms of the hotel in Acapulco in Mexico paying 3% in terms of energy. Now, ECCB, of course, has a mandate, as you mentioned, in terms of advising the different member states in the ECCU. And part of that would be seeing the ECCB taking a lead in green initiatives. Tell us a bit about that.
Oh, we have a vision and passion for green. I mean, it starts with a simple thing. We're a central bank. Beyond our development hat, of course, we see development front and center, but we're a central bank. Our job is to preserve the value of the currency, manage our foreign reserves. We see how much we spend every year, Mr. Richards, on electricity, for example. $1.6, $1.8 billion per year on electricity. We understand that $1 saved in foreign exchange is $1 earned. So from the point of view of just the foreign reserves, it makes great sense for us to focus on renewable energy transition, where we are less reliant on fossil fuels and more reliant on renewable energy. I mean, the fact of the matter is, we are paying some of the highest rates for electricity in the Western Hemisphere. We in the Eastern Caribbean.
Why do you think that is?
Because we're totally dependent on the external market for oil, for energy. Totally dependent. 90% thereabouts of our energy comes from fossil fuels. Our price is dictated by external parties, not ourselves. And whatever that price is, we have to find it and pay it. So it makes absolute sense for us to address this. And we cannot, let's be clear, we cannot transform this region without transforming our energy situation. We see that. We see that. So that decision to green our campus is a signal to everybody, our governments, our people, that this is a priority. And we're not just talking, we're doing. We're not just advocating, we're acting. Because we understand that at the end of the day, we have no control over oil prices. For us to have any control over energy prices and ultimately to lower the cost of energy, we have to generate our own energy from renewable sources, from indigenous sources. In this case, the sun, solar PV. It may be geothermal. It could be wind, but solar PV is the lowest hanging fruit. We started there. But I also want to make the point. For us at ECCB, it strengthens our hand in advocacy for our member countries. Moral authority. I can say to any country, look at what this small group of countries are doing. Look at what they're doing. Look at what this small group is doing. Shame on you. You need to do better. You are a large emitter. You have far more resources. We are paying for a problem that we didn't cause. Lowest emitters, among the lowest, but the hardest hit by climate change. These greenhouse gases. Look at what we're doing with our limited resources. We're taking initiative. I understand we can't solve climate change by doing this plan by itself, but it's a very powerful signal and a very important tool in terms of our arsenal for moral authority to make the argument, which we do, about lowering emissions and also supporting our member countries to help them to accelerate the renewable energy transition, whether that is solar PV, geothermal, wind, or whatever.
And your experience that the politicians, the persons in the region, that there is that political will to move towards greening?
There is, but there's some issues, there's some challenges. One of which is funding. So in some cases, finding the resources to do whether it's solar PV or geothermal, and we know, of course, what's happening here in St. Kitts and Nevis in particular, is expensive, it's capital intensive. So you have to have the capital up front to do it. And not just the capital up front, you want to have grants and very concessional funding to prove the resource, to establish that you have the enthalpy, the heat, and you have the permeability in the rock that will allow that heat to come up so that you can have a viable project. And ideally, you want to do that before you engage a private operator in some kind of off-take arrangement to sell, to develop and sell. The reason why I make this point is because if we don't have that up front where we prove the resource, so in a sense we de-risk the opportunity, the investment opportunity by proving the resource before we engage, we then find ourselves entering into very skewed, one-sided agreements with developers who don't have money. And many times they don't have money, they're promising, but they don't have the money, but will tie up our countries, tie up our governments into arrangements where they are getting all of the benefits if they could find the money. And in the meantime, while they can't find the money, they have tied up the situation. So other investors can't come because there's an agreement in place and so on. The lesson we've learned, because we've been on this path for a while, is that the best way to develop geothermal is to get some concessional resources, grant or concessional resources, prove the resource, establish that you have a viable geothermal project there, and then engage with a private operator to do the development and the transmission, the generation and transmission, but with the clarity that this is proven. You can then get a more equitable agreement for the government, for the people of the country, in terms of the risk and the benefits of the investment. So the challenge for our government has been finding the resources to do that, but I also think some gaps in terms of the policy and regulatory issues. So for example, if you're going to encourage renewables, you have to have a feed-in tariff. You, Mr. Richards, must know, if I invest on solar PV, on my house, on my business, this is the price I'm going to get for any energy I sell to SKNIS. Why do you need to know that? Because when you sit down with your banker, assuming you're financing from a bank or credit union, you have to have clarity on your payback period. If you don't have that, you're not taking that risk. That is something St. Kitts and Nevis and some of our other member countries have to develop quickly, the feed-in tariff. So if you have independent power producers, there's clarity on what exactly they can expect. If I sell to you, this is the price I'm getting. I already know if I buy from you what I'm paying.
Makes my investment worthwhile.
Correct.
Right. All right. And so as we speak about dealing with the individuals now in terms of, as you mentioned, selling back energy and other areas, the question is asked then, how does the bank interact with the public? Of course, we established that, the governments, there is advisory capacity, but how does the bank interact with the public? How do they engage the public?
We have multiple channels. The one that I want to start with is, of course, our award-winning weekly podcast, ECCB Connects, which allows us every week to bring key messages, information to our stakeholders in the region and around the world. And importantly, not just for us to bring information, but for us to bring in stakeholders and what we call co-create content. So, and we really took that to another level during the pandemic, where it was not just ECCB staff, ECCB management, putting content out, putting information out, but we were identifying experts in health and experts in finance and experts in whatever, along with our expertise, combining them and bringing appropriate content, relevant content, helpful content to our people. So that's the weekly. We also have a Children's Connection radio program once a month that we do where we try to connect with our children, financial literacy, prizes to really engage them and really begin to build their awareness about financial management and so on. Country outreach. I visit the countries, member countries, with a team every year. We present our views, performance prospects, what we're doing in the name, what we're doing on our strategic plan, We take their views, we take their comments and criticisms as well, and we go back and do better.
How are those engagements?
Excellent, excellent, because we meet with everybody. When I say everybody, broad cross-section. Governor General, Prime Minister, Cabinet, Leader of the Opposition and team, civil society, labor unions, business community, churches, civil society, youth, media, schools. We cover a lot of ground, and we get a lot of feedback. People love it. People really enjoy having their central bank come and talk to them, their governor come and sit down and listen to them, take their views, answer their questions. We also have a sit-down interview. We take live questions on a television program. People appreciate that. They want that access. So those are it. And then, of course, we have multiple missions. Our bank examiners are in the field, constantly going to our banks to examine them. We have teams going into the member countries with technical assistance. We have countries coming to the central bank, internships. So it is a range of ways we actually engage with. We talk to them all the time, daily, on the phone, on WebEx, whatever, Zoom. So we have multiple channels for engaging our member countries. And I will still tell you, we need to do more. It's never enough. But we are very much engaged with our member countries.
Governor, we are running out of time for this program, so we're going to take a quick break and give you an opportunity to speak a bit about the activities that are going to be held to celebrate the 40th anniversary that the bank has. And one of them, of course, is a virtual museum. And when we took our break earlier, persons would have seen an image on the screen and wondered what it was. I apologize for those who are not able who those listening,
yes,
they wouldn't be able to experience that, but there will be an opportunity for them to do that as well, and we'll give them more information about that. But we're going to take a break and have a second part of the tour, the virtual museum that the bank has. Good. Let's take a break, and we'll be right back with more in Focus.
Excellent.
Welcome back to InFocus. We are speaking with the Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Timothy Antoine. So as we mentioned, ECCB is celebrating 40 years. Tell us a bit about how the bank, and we appreciate it's been a year-long celebration, but I would want you to focus in on maybe some of the highlights back then, not too much because they've already gone, but more so what is happening in October this month. I know that there is quite a number of things that are happening. Tell us a bit about how the bank is celebrating 40 years of service to the government and people of the ECCU.
Great. So our theme is ECCB at 40, a year of reflection, celebration, and implementation. We have a planning committee that is chaired by our Deputy Governor, Dr. Valda Henry, and we have many members of our staff on subcommittees working, and they've been working really, really hard. As you said, it's been year-long. I'll just highlight the fact we had a lecture in every member country, 40th anniversary lecture. The last one was in Dominica in September, and we culminate in St. Kitts, where we're based, and Nevis, where we're based, in November with our global conference. Really, really good content on health, on medical tourism, on digital, range of issues. They're all on our YouTube channel, ECCB Connects, and I'll encourage you, if you haven't been, you missed it, that's the beauty of technology. You can go and find it, and very, very, very interesting.
YouTube and Facebook, I've seen it on Facebook.
Correct,
as well.
and Facebook as well, ECCB Connects as well. We have had, as you mentioned, the virtual museum, which we launched, I believe, in July. And as I said, it's not just for posterity, but it's for accessibility. Any currency, any country, any citizen in any member country, any part of our currency or around the world can check out our virtual museum. You can be at the central bank even if you're not in St. Kitts and Nevis, is my point. Then, as you said, this month, of course, is our anniversary month. We have this week, on Thursday, the Youth Symposium, 9 to 12. So we have youth parliamentarians coming in from various all our member countries with a chaperone. They'll be at our headquarters on Thursday and Friday. Symposium on Thursday, youth symposium.
Before you go there, what will be the youth parliamentarians? What will they be discussing?
Crime is one of the issues that they will be discussing. What to do about crime and deviant behavior. I know that violence. That is definitely one of the areas that they'll be discussing on Friday. So on Friday, between 9 and 12, we have our youth parliament. On October 21, we have our Creative Arts Festival and Island Night. So you could expect food, you could expect fete, you could expect music, culture, and again, it's 8 countries. So you know you're going to get a sample of the currency union. So that's October. November 8th to 10th is our global conference, and then we have our gala in December 9th. We will also be launching a commemorative note before the end of the year, and more to come on that very, very soon. A commemorative note before the end of the year, more to come on that very soon. We've had a number of other activities, planting of tree. We have a youth quiz, a school quiz coming up in the next few weeks, I think later this month actually. We have a school quiz focused on ECCB and helping our students, our children to know more about the central bank, what it does, how it helps them. All of those things are really a series of things that we've done throughout the year. And we are very pleased with how those have been going. I do want to say, before we go, the ECCB does a lot for our youth. And I don't think sometimes enough is said by us and enough is understood by our citizens and residents about what we do. So for example, right now as we speak in Antigua and Barbuda, we have the ECCB International Netball Series. This is a tournament we sponsored for the last 32 years, I believe. And certainly we have expanded it. Our sponsorship is about $250,000, right, this year. And that is to develop netball, support our young women. And we not just do the sport or support the sport, but we have personal development sessions for them to help them grow as individuals, not just as athletes. We are currently also doing what we call a Bright Sparks program. This is an internship program where we bring students in IT. They come to the bank, give them a 6-month internship, maybe extend it for another 6 months. We hire some of them. In St. Kitts and Nevis alone, we've had 5 students come through that program. Overall, since we launched the program, we've had 14 interns, 8 men, 6 women. Over the summer, we did a STEM camp. STEM for students, to encourage them in science, technology, engineering, arts and mathematics team. Robotics, we've collaborated with the Robotics Association here. We fund SPICE scholarships. Students who are looking to do a career in STEM and need their preparation to be able to get into one of those Ivy League schools. We send them to Barbados for 6 weeks during the summer. We pay for that. Each student costs us $7,500 US. I remember Roger J. Williams from Nevis went a few years ago. 2 from our currency every year, and we try to give all our member countries an opportunity. We have under the Caribbean Digital Transformation Program, we've done some projects where we support young people who are looking to do fintech. So I've just given that as an example to show we have the mentorship schools. So here in St. Kitts, Irish Tongue Primary is our mentorship school. The public may not be aware, but after the very tragic incident earlier this year, in February, I believe it was, we supported the school as it was getting ready to reopen. We supported them with fencing, paid for the fencing, security, including cameras. We also did some other equipment. And in every member country, we have a mentorship school, a school that we've adopted. Our staff and team, we also mentor between grades 4 and 6 in those schools. Grades 4 to 6 in those schools. It's not exhaustive, but what I'm trying to say here is that there are a lot of things that we are doing to support our young people. So whether it's the youth parliament this week, or the STEM, or the netballers, or the people who are pursuing, we look at how we can support our youth, give them a voice, give them a platform, give them an opportunity to develop particular skills, scholarships. There are a range of things that we do. the savings and investment courses that we did for years to help people to grow their money management skills. You know, these are some of the things that we do to touch people in their everyday lives and really help them be better. And we're proud of that work, and I don't think we say enough about what we do in those areas.
It seems like the focus really of support is geared towards the young people. What's the strategy behind that?
Well, we understand the demographics. It's a numbers game. I mean, we understand numbers. I mean, if 60% of our population, 65, are under the age of 30 or 35, then you have to, if you're going to do any meaningful development, have specific programming for youth. This is not to say we're excluding our older people. Dcash is for everybody. I didn't talk about Dcash this afternoon, but our digital currency is for any and everybody. Everybody has a phone, almost everybody. Even our children now have phones, right? They can use Dcash. So we cover everybody, but obviously we give a lot of attention to our youth.
And that youth parliament that you mentioned in particular is something that I would want to touch very briefly on in terms of the fact that you mentioned that there are persons that are coming in from each ECCU country, two persons that is. And the topic, of course, is crime, which, of course, is a problem across the ECCU, across the CARICOM region, across the world, of course. So, and it's important to have young persons to voice their opinions on that. So what are your expectations for that youth parliament session?
I expect some very forceful, eloquent, lucid views, ideas from our youth as they see it about how we should tackle this vexing issue of crime and violence. And as many have said in recent times, this is a public health issue. It's not just a problem. And so it's multifaceted, and it has to be tackled by all of society. So I expect the youth whose future, all of us, it impacts all of us, but whose future are most at risk from crime, to have a lot to say, and we should listen to them. Their perspective is going to be important. So I expect them to come with very clear, strong, compelling arguments, positions about what we should be doing. And to be very clear, I'm not expecting them to simply say the government has to do everything, because the government cannot do everything. The governments cannot. I'm expecting them to identify roles and responsibility, areas where you must play, parents, government, church, the youth themselves, you know, how we all contribute to addressing this vexing issue of crime and deviant behavior.
And as we speak of the risking, Governor, of course, the question has to be asked, of course, as we establish that the ECCU countries, many of them are dependent upon tourism for getting the foreign exchange and for, you know, the GDP. Well, as we speak about the risking, what risks do crime pose to the development of the region?
Well, you cannot have any sustainable society, any viable society, where there isn't law and order and there isn't peace and security. You just can't. I mean, a simple example, a business person decides to make an investment, take a risk. All of a sudden, their projections for business and traffic gets impacted because people are afraid to go out. People are afraid to line. They can't then service their loan. That has an implication for the financial institution. That has an implication for their own dreams, to build a home, to send their children to school, to educate their families. I mean, it's just peace of mind. You want to live in a society where there is peace. We are, you know, we located in paradise, you know, a tropical paradise. But that paradise is hell if we don't have peace. You see, so beyond tourists, just for ourselves, just for our families, just for our own quality of living and quality of life, we want to see peace in these lovely isles, these beautiful isles. And then, of course, because tourism is our major foreign exchange and our major export, we must have that. And we talk about tourism, but you can take it further to business and international investors. If there is crime, you're going to hide. The cost of business goes up, and or you get less people wanting to invest. So there are so many reasons why we have to really address this crime issue. Region. I mean, this is not unique to St. Kitts and Nevis. We know that these are regional issues, global issues. But the reality is that we have to consistently work towards resolving these issues. If not, we wake up and we ask ourselves, how did we get here? And already, I mean, there were signs that we probably ignored. And now we're dealing with issues that we rather not deal with. So that is a very important one. They picked their topic, and I think it's a good area, a very timely area of focus for youth parliamentarians.
And just quickly, Governor, in terms of the Arts Festival and Island Night that you mentioned, where is that going to be held, and is it open to the public?
On our campus, and yes, it's open to the public, but you have to go online and apply. Meaning, obviously, we could only take a certain number. It has to be appropriately managed, secure. We're not going to overcrowd. So yes, our staff obviously have an opportunity to invite some family or friends, and then the public can also come up to a certain number. And there's, I believe, on our Facebook page, if it's not up, it will be up shortly, where people can go to say, well, I want to come, and you sort of reserve a spot. But yes, it will be open to the public.
Okay. And Governor, before we leave, I just want to jump back as well to the virtual museum, because of course, as you mentioned, we're celebrating 40 years of the ECCB, and the virtual museum captures many of the milestones within that 40 years. And what I liked about it, as I mentioned, in terms of persons who either go on or they may be looking at this program and would have seen the tour, is that every section is clickable. The videos, you can click on the videos and they're embedded there. You can either watch them without going into, or you can open the section and look at the video full screen if you want to. There is the history of the notes. It was so interesting to me, for me to see that there was a $2 note, well, a $2 coin with Arthur Lewis's face on it. I had no idea about that. And you know, there are some of the accomplishments that are listed throughout the years. You can learn about Sir Cecil Jacobs, who was the first, of course, the first governor, as you established earlier. Talk to us about that virtual museum, because I don't want to sell it for you. You're the one who, of course, is in charge as the bank.
Well, you've set it up nicely. You even showed a couple clips. All I want to do is, you've whet the appetite, go and look at the thing. Check it out for yourself. The virtual museum, and I want to hail out, give a shout out to Valencia Grant, because she led that effort. She has put her heart and soul into it, doing the research, going into the library, the archives, months putting all of this together, but it is worth it. So that is really a gift to the currency union, the people of the currency union. On our birthday, our anniversary, 40 years, we give back to you in this virtual museum a treasure trove of what we have done in your name, and a keepsake, because you can go in there, and we will continue to update it as we go beyond the 40th anniversary, because we believe it's a powerful tool for our people. But I want to recognize also the support we've had from the government and people of St. Kitts and Nevis as our host. So all of the Premier Bradshaw, all the prime ministers over that period, and the people, all the financial secretaries, including the current financial secretary, Mrs. Hilary Hazel, they have all, Mr. Wendell Lawrence before her, they have all supported us along the way and continue to support us, our presence here. And it's important. The host government and host country plays an important role as well. So I want to recognize and thank all those who have supported us in the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank over the last 40 years. I have thanked our current staff, past staff, retirees. I want to make sure resignees, the people who left, you didn't retire, but you came and went. You came and left. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. You too have shares in this enterprise called ECCB. And I thank you for your support, for your contribution, not just to the bank, but our region during the past 40 years. So really, it's a time of celebration, because really what is ultimately to be celebrated is a simple fact that these small countries, deemed hopeless and helpless by some, came together in common cause, formed a central bank that has stood the test of time. That has stood the test of time. The pride that we feel about our ECCB, wherever you go in the world, the pride you feel about this institution that the European Central Bank came to look at, that the Gulf Council came to look like, the BIAC came to look at, that's the Central African Monetary Authority. All of that came from ECCB. Our small countries coming together. So all of our leaders, Monetary Council Board, Sir Cecil Jacobs, Sir Dwight Venner, Sir Errol Allen, Mr. Trevor Brathwaite, Mr. Wentworth Harris, Mrs. Jennifer Nero, on and on and on, the early builders, all of them, along with those of us who serve today, we are making our contributions. So, Mr. Richard, I want to thank you for this opportunity to highlight the work and the service of ECCB to our people and to our region.
Well, thank you, Governor, for accepting. And of course, we would love to have you back to discuss a bit more of the macroeconomic issues as we speak about inflation. Of course, there are signs that the global economy is beginning to slow down. What does it mean for our people? Certainly, we'd love to have you back to
we'll
discuss
be back.
That. So
and if it's not me, it's one of our team members. But ECCB will be happy to be back to talk about these issues. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Governor. And just quickly before we leave, I'd like to, if you're interested in learning a bit more about the virtual museum, you can do a quick Google search. If you don't find it on the ECCB Facebook page or on the website itself, you can just type in ECCB Virtual Museum 40th Anniversary and you'll be sure to find it. So I'd like to thank you for joining us for this edition of InFocus. We trust that you will join us next week at the same place at the same time for another edition of InFocus. I'm Ian Richards.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.